Some of you will surely remember me taking a look at the DF600 FLUX by Antec a few months ago, and it didn't turn out to be a bad case by any means, but there were some major drawbacks that I just had to mention, mainly concerning fan noise levels, or rather controlling or lack thereof. And it wasn't just me that criticized that, others did too, and in the meantime Antec has released their DF700 FLUX mid-tower case, which happens to come with some great improvements over the DF600 FLUX. That's what I can tell you right off the bat. So Antec sure does appear to be that kind of brand that listens to what reviewers and consumers have to say about their products. They try to improve. Now, whether or not they have succeeded in doing so with today's DF700 FLUX, you'll find out in this video. As for pricing, realistically speaking, it's sitting at around $80 currently. That's not a whole lot of money to spend on a case, especially not given the fact Antec is equipping this one with a total of 5 already pre-installed fans, 3 of which are Argb illuminated. So let's go ahead and see what this case has to offer. Besides the usual case accessories, what immediately catches one's attention might be that small white box all tied up by a cable tie. This is the so-called reverse fan, which basically is supposed to be mounted onto the PSU shroud. We get 2 choices in position for this one. It is recommended to install it in the more centered spot though. More on that a bit later. The looks, the aesthetics, what are my thoughts on it? Well, let's put it this way, it doesn't really meet my minimalistic glass or steel display case type of design taste, but that's not the point. Looks are always a matter of preference, and many sure will be into this type of approach. I probably should elaborate on the whole FLUX term. FLUX consists of 2 words, flow luxury. This more or less is Antec's new cooling platform, if you will. What I'm talking about is a kind of new, not so usual airflow approach, so to speak. The main focus of the FLUX platform is on cooling the graphics card. So as I've already mentioned in the beginning, Antec is equipping the DF700 FLUX with a total of 5 fans right out of the box. 3 Argb illuminated fans in the front, 1 non-illuminated one on the rear, and that 1 reverse fan intended to be mounted on top of the PSU shroud. Now, since it's obvious airflow is in the foreground here, I find it to be a good move to not go with acrylic or glass for the front. As much as I love my glass in the front, to be perfectly honest with you all, mesh definitely is the best option when it comes to allowing the case to properly breathe, when putting it this way. That mesh panel also comes with a pretty interesting and to some of you surely appealing design. But where does that reverse fan actually intake fresh air from? Very simple. On the right steel side panel, along the bottom part of it, there are lots of vents. Behind those, there's even a magnetic dust filter hiding, so fresh air can be drawn in from this side through the PSU chamber until it reaches the graphics card. I personally think this is a great idea. I do want to point out though that there's no dust filter included for the front. For many of us, a deal breaker right away, even though you could buy a dust filter for fairly cheap online. On the other hand, what has also come to my attention is that some of you even prefer having a front dust filter removed, basically to help maximize airflow. Anyway, on the top we get a simple magnetic dust filter and a simple removable one on the bottom for the power supply. The overall package Antec is offering in this price range, below the $100 mark, seems very impressive on paper at least. In terms of cooling/radiators, you could fit up to a 360 or 280mm one in the front. Same goes for the top, where you can also fit up to a 360 or 280mm radiator. But also tall air coolers and very long graphics cards can easily have room in this DF700 FLUX. Brilliantly solved in my opinion is the fact those mounting holes on the top for fans and radiators have been moved a bit further sideways away from the motherboard tray to keep the motherboard's heatsinks etc. from interfering with radiators, for instance. Where it's obvious money has been saved on is no rubber grommets. What also immediately caught my eye was the fairly thin steel, which becomes very apparent on the right side panel. The glass panel, on the other hand, is surprisingly thick and robust. We also do have the option to proudly showcase our power supply, since there's a cathode hole for it on the side of the PSU shroud. It's about time power supplies have a chance to shine these days. Obviously, installing a graphics card vertically is not an option with this case, but quite frankly, in a price range of about $80, that's a bit too much to expect anyway. What greatly managed to impress me is the integrated Argb/PWM fan controller. First of all, we aren't just getting one of those cheap proprietary connections, but instead the standard universal solution with 3 3-pin Argb headers still free, ready to be connected to. Now, since we are dealing with a controller, instead of a reset button, we are changing colors and effects via an LED button. Of course, you could also hook up the entire lighting to your motherboard if you wanted to. What managed to impress me even more is the fact Antec really seemed to listen to us reviewers and consumers and now did include a fan controller, even with 2 3-pin headers still free to be connected to. So unlike with the DF600 FLUX, where the fans were operating at full speed 100%, 12 volts all the time, with this particular case, we can control the fans via a single PWM cable with our motherboard. That's great stuff, and it's exactly how it should be done, meaning fan noise levels are now finally under control. While the DF600 FLUX could only be considered noisy, the DF700 FLUX, on the other hand, now delivers a much quieter experience, ranging from quiet to acceptable noise levels. Hats off, Antec. HDD and SSD mounting point options are quite interesting in here. The hard drive cage only comes with a single tray, in which an HDD can easily be installed all toollessly. We do, however, also have another option, and that is to screw a 3.5 or 2.5 inch drive onto the drive cage. Why not simply offer 2 trays in the first place? I've no clue. By loosening 2 screws, the hard drive cage can even be removed completely out of the case. But it still needs to be said that on a case steel wall you could also mount 3.5 as well as 2.5 inch drives, respectively. That is besides those 2 hanging trays for SSDs. And yeah, obviously my usual test system fits just nicely into the DF700 FLUX. In fact, building into this case was a very pleasant, relaxed and hassle-free experience. There's also plenty of airflow. This goes to show how big of an advantage a classic mesh panel is in the front, albeit I'd sure like to see an optional dust filter included. As always, I'm not winning any beauty prizes with my cable management, but you're all pretty much used to that anyway. The case in itself definitely would offer tidier cable management than what I've done with it, that's for sure. Noteworthy may or may not be the I/O area. Right out of the box, all the ports come with dust plugs in place to help keep dust out. So overall, the Antec DF700 FLUX definitely does score with me. Of course it's not perfect. At a price point of $80, that is only rarely the case. $80, and to meet the criteria, perfection is close to impossible. With this one, we are getting a case with lots of options, especially when it comes to storage and cooling. The implementation of FLUX I personally really like. The graphics card is benefiting a lot from it. We certainly get improved airflow in the GPU area, and the rest of the case those front fans take care of. So the whole case breathes just nicely, if you allow me to use that term. Furthermore, I love having a decent Argb/fan controller on board without those pesky proprietary connections. Of course, the DF700 FLUX doesn't seem to be made with the highest of quality standards in mind, but if you're asking me, for the price we are getting a really good overall package, which is why in this price range I can definitely recommend it. With that being said, thanks for watching, take care and stay healthy out there.